Hey Sugar Snaps, welcome to the Textile Indie YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Brittany and we are working on a Vlogmas series right now here on the channel. Today I'll be joined by Sherry. We're going to use fabric to create some autumn or winter decorations. So let's get started. This is a project that I've done several times this year. I really like to make seasonal cloth napkins for the table. I think it really adds a little something something. I have a set of fall napkins that I've made with this fabric as the base. This fabric came from the very first quilt that I ever made. It was a table square I took in a class, let's see, about 30 years ago. So I've been hanging on to this fabric for quite a while. I already have the napkins and I wanted to do something cute that I've been putting on my kitchen window to tie in with my table decorating. So I pulled this fabric out and I found some other similar pieces that I have that kind of read fall and go with my color scheme. I found those. And just a point, I think I acquired this from a neighbor's garage sale, but when I went to iron it, I realized that it had a lot of color fading in certain spots as if it had been folded and kept on a shelf. And so there were whole sections of it that had faded. This is a great way to use less than stellar fabric or scraps of fabric. So when I take my quilting fabric and I make my quilt or my napkins or whatever I'm doing with it, I am always left with this thin strip, and it's the perfect amount of fabric for this project. So for starters, there are a couple of shapes that you can make, and we did ours with a rotary cutter and a quilting ruler. If you don't already have quilting tools, you can do this by making yourself a pattern with a piece of cardstock or cardboard and cut it out, and then you'll just have to trace it and fussy cut it. That's another way that you can do this. I suppose you could also eyeball it if you're brave. But I've come up with a couple of different shapes. There is this shape, the pennant, and we are going to end up attaching these together with embroidery floss and to make the little bunting to go in the window. By accident, I folded it the wrong way, so instead of cutting it the direction I was supposed to go, I cut it the opposite direction and ended up with this. And then I realized, oh, that is a traditional shape for a bunting or a pennant. So that's cute too, if that's a look that you're going for. And then the other one is to just make your very traditional triangle. And we did that by folding it in half and cutting it from point to point, which we'll get into in a minute. We decided to keep this craft very fast and very simple, as if you look around your house before company comes over and you think, I just need a little something extra. You could put this project together in about a half an hour, assuming that you already have a stash of fabric scraps, which I'm assuming you do because you watch this channel. So this is a really quick thing to make at the last minute. If you wanted more longevity, if you wanted this to be just a little fancier, you could pillowcase these and then turn them inside out and then stitch together with a piece of either rickrack or bias binding. Cut these two pieces together back to back. They match perfectly. In the window that I put them in, you can see it from the outside, so it does matter to me what the back looks like. I don't want the back of a piece of fabric. These fabrics happen to be two-sided. But I don't want some of my novelty fabric, you know, it looks white on the back. I want the good side on both sides so that you can see it from outside the house and it looks just as good. But if you cut them together, they look great. They look almost as if they're sewn as one piece. Another way you can finish off the edges without sewing your pieces together is if you want a little decorative edge, you could use a pair of pinking shears or scalloped scissors and come along the edges to trim those down with the pinking shears. That gives it a little scalloped edge, finishes off the fabric to ensure that it doesn't unravel, and then you have both decorative edge and a nice finished edge that won't come apart. These, unless they're in a high traffic area, and usually buntings are not, the fraying isn't going to be a problem because once you hang them up, they're just going to hang there and the edges won't rub up against anything. The only thing would be when you store them, folding them up or storing them somewhere that they don't get rubbed against often. You probably aren't going to need to wash these. You just gave me a great idea. I'm going to do a spring set of these, and I'm actually going to fussy cut a scalloped edge. Yeah. I love scallops, so yeah, that's a good idea. That'd be cute. We will show you how we did this because we used our quilting ruler, and after I cut the squares, we start out by cutting this fabric into strips with squares, and I have one of these. This is your standard Omnigrid ruler. I just cut them this width of the ruler. If you don't like the way this is like a little bit wider, squatter shape, you could make your strips thinner, and so it's all personal preference. There's no right way. But since I have this, I just cut them this width, and then we fold the piece in half. This is where you have to make sure you're cutting from the right direction, depending on whether you want to end up with this or this. You're going to cut from the folded edge.
So it took Brittany and I a second to remember how this works. But we lay the ruler down. You'll find there's a 45-degree angle marked on every one of these rulers. You've got a 30, 45, and a 60 degree. So you're going to find your folded edge and then line up the 45-degree line right there on the edge of your fabric. I get eyesight issues here. So I'm lined up on my 45-degree edge right at the point of the folded edge of the fabric. That way I'm also finding the center point of my block. And then you'll cut your little triangles off and open it up, and voila, you have a perfectly even cut triangle pennant. So I've been tying these garlands together with embroidery floss, but you could use an infinite number of things. You could do ribbon, beads, jute, yes, whatever your look is.
Thread, rickrack, bias tape. You could even use bias tape and glue it on the top, so using like even a hot glue gun if you're trying to be really quick.
Yeah.
Just glue along the top edge, stick the fabric in the bias tape, and then glue it closed. Depends on how quickly you're trying to move.
Doing a knot on the end and then a knot here, because at my house what I end up doing is putting a tack at the top of the window edge and then tying it around the tack, so I always give myself a little bit of a...
So you could leave a longer tail if you're going to drape it down or have it hang further distance.
And you'll just have to figure out how you're going to do it. I have noticed that if I just go all the way across, I get a lot more buckling, so I think it works better. I don't necessarily want this to show, so I'm just going to go halfway, take a stitch, give it a little more oomph, and then go to the next corner. I picked this more for contrast than that it's my favorite look, but we're going to go with it. Depending on what you're using, I could knot each end, which would keep them from coming together, but the place that I put them, I can adjust them and then they don't move. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep going. Again, especially if your fabric is a little bit slidey or the material you're using to knit it together is slidey, you would want to make some sort of a knot, a stopper at each side, or put a bead in or some way so that they don't just slide together.
Yeah.
Because embroidery floss tends to knot and tangle really easily, you're probably going to have to tie it back together and continue on. I'd only
do a new piece.
Yeah, only take off about 18 inches or you almost always will end up with some kind of a snarl. Okay, well, this is the idea. We'll hold it up here. So
cute.
Yes.
So and you just multiply this by another length, add more string, and
yep.
Yeah.
Depending on how
situate these closer or further apart, depending on what you want.
Your look and where you're going to put them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I ended up cutting 8, and that is just about right for the window in my kitchen. And that spot has just become my bunting window. It just looks really great. It's the first thing I see when I walk into the kitchen, so it's a bit of a focal point. That's about all I do in the kitchen, but it's just that nice little pop of color and festiveness that reminds me of the season or the holiday that's upcoming.
This technique could be used in a lot of different materials. You could also do this same kind of concept with paper and then just punch small holes in the corners or thread it through with a needle. I've also done this with pieces of wool that I dyed with natural dyes and then put it together on a piece of, I think I did it on lace, like a cotton lace, and then hung it up as a decoration. So lots of different options. You can use the printed fabric. You could use something plain and then dye it. You could use paper. You could stamp paper and hang it. So the possibilities are practically endless. And then the way that you put the pieces on a string or whatever you're going to hang it from, the garland aspect to it. Those, again, you could use beads. You could use ribbon, jute, the embroidery floss, lots of different things to play around with that as well.
I just had a thought. You could also get those little miniature clothespins.
Oh, yeah.
And you could actually clothespin it to your piece, which could be really cute.
Yeah, that would be cute.
So baby shower, this is simple enough and inexpensive enough that it can just be used as a one-off for a party or something like that. I think it's just a really great way to add a little color to your space.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for watching, and be sure to come back for our other Vlogmas videos. Until next time, happy making. See you later. Bye.
Bye.